Welcome back to the 29th Annual Massachusetts Multicultural Film Festival, presented by the Film Studies program at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I'm Daniel Pope, the director of the festival, together with Sean Shimpak. Nefeli Forni-Zaputaki is our assistant curator, and Laura McGough curates the 2022 MMFF with the theme of indigeneities, presenting a season of global contemporary Indigenous film and media art. I'm pleased to welcome Josh Guilford, who'll provide an introduction for Rhayne Vermette's debut feature film, Saint Anne. Josh Guilford is Assistant Professor of English, Film, and Media Studies at Amherst College. His research focuses on histories and theories of experimental cinema, with an emphasis on 1960s experimental film culture, the new American cinema. Guilford's writings have appeared in Alternative Projections, experimental film in Los Angeles, The Global 60s and Sound and Vision, Media, Counterculture, Revolt, and other publications. With Toby Lee, he is co-editor of a special dossier on documentary worldmaking published in the online journal World Records. Joshua Guilford will moderate a conversation and audience Q&A with our filmmaker, Rhayne Vermette, at our live stream event on Wednesday, April 13th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Welcome, Josh.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Josh Guilford, and just wanted to say thank you for inviting me to introduce this screening of Saint Anne, which is a truly beautiful film by the artist Rhayne Vermette. For this intro, I want to mention what I think are two really interesting aspects of this film's production history, which Vermette has spoken about in other contexts, but which you may not have encountered on the path that brought you to this screening. The first is that Vermette has described this film as the result of two relatively distinct shooting processes. On the one hand, the film was originally based on a script that Vermette wrote, and many of the sequences that form the backbone of the film's narrative were shot over the course of 2 years in a way that we've come to associate with fiction filmmaking, where Vermette worked with a small cast and crew comprised mainly of friends, relatives, and other artists, particularly women artists, to stage and shoot fictional scenes, some of which were drawn from the script and some of which were created in a more improvisatory and intuitive way. But along with this mode of production, Vermette has said that about half the film was shot in a much more intimate and introspective style, where she and her dad would drive around Manitoba in the truck with the camera in the truck and look for things to shoot, spaces, landscapes. So I think that the combination of these two different processes is really interesting, and that it results in a kind of stylistic duality in the finished film, which oscillates continuously between fictional narrative sequences and sequences that convey a much more poetic and even diaristic style. And I'm interested in what that duality does to us as viewers. When we encounter this mix of different styles, how should we respond? Should we try to make them cohere into a larger unity? Or should we let them coexist in their specificity and difference, even allowing for a kind of friction between them? I'm not entirely sure if Vermette has a preference here, but I would note that she often talks about her work as embodying a kind of collage aesthetic. For example, she has spoken of the depiction of Manitoba that we get in Saint Anne as a collage of really dispersed and distant locales, or fragmented images of very distinct spaces that are kind of patched together into a new proximity in this film. And that idea of Saint Anne as a collage work would seem to encourage us as viewers to try to resist the urge to make these different styles and fragments fit together in a really clean way, precisely because collage allows for a bit more messiness and even incongruity or aesthetic dissonance. So, thinking of this film as a collage might help us to appreciate those forms of dissonance and even aesthetic tension that we encounter over the course of its duration. Personally, in my own viewing, I've come to appreciate the way this film can be read or viewed almost as two separate films, or perhaps more than two films, that coexist in the same representational space, where the final work, this film, Saint Anne, functions almost like a container for these various aspects, or as a forum in which they are allowed to communicate. So that's the first thing, this kind of dual mode of production, dual style. The second thing I wanted to talk about was just the fact that this film was made in a very collaborative and collective way, which the director has characterized as a familial mode of production, a chaotic mode of production, but also as a distinctly matriarchal mode of production. So it was made in a very consciously anti-industrial way, meaning that production roles were often much more collaborative and exchangeable than what you might encounter in a studio system, and that creative contributions came from all levels of the production team, not just from the director down. And I wanted to mention this in part because I think it's an important aspect of this film's story, but it's also one that can be difficult for us as viewers to discern, precisely because these kinds of relationships and practices are typically relegated to a kind of off-screen space. They take place at the moment of production and are important to the film's realization, but usually they only manifest in the final text in places like the credits. So I wanted to foreground that as a kind of lens through which to view this work, the notion of a familial or matriarchal mode of production. But I also wanted to emphasize the ways in which the values and priorities that seem to have governed the film's production also manifest in the film itself, and particularly in Vermette's emphasis on familial relations and spaces of female sociality. Something that I find especially valuable about the film is the way that it attends to these familial and feminine relations, particularly through its depiction of multiple generations of Métis women and the way in which it shows these women living and existing in relation with one another. I think that's a really important contribution to contemporary film culture, and I hope that you'll agree. So that's all that I'll say for now, though I'll end by inviting you all to join us for a Q&A with Rhayne Vermette on the night of April 13th, which I look forward to very much. Thank you.